Thank you for asking me to do this. It's a good practice for me as well to think about the tonglen practice. Before we do it, let's just take a minute and cultivate our motivation. And so to really think that we're here to listen and learn the Dharma so we can, especially through the tonglen practice, develop and increase our love and compassion for living beings, as well as our fortitude, willing to bear suffering, and our joyous effort that takes delight in virtue. And through cultivating these qualities, through learning the tonglen practice, may this add to our collection of merit, our collection of wisdom, as we follow the path to full Buddhahood, so we can be of the most effective benefit to each and every living being. So just take a moment and make that your motivation for being here. So the 7-point mind transformation is one of my favorite texts. I was introduced to it very early on, and it quickly became one of my favorite ones because it's all about how to transform adversity into the path. And we all have adversity in our lives, and especially now, since the last election, even more adversity. So more opportunity to practice the Dharma, because the thought training teachings really emphasize that in a degenerate age, this is, practicing the Dharma is so valuable. You create so much more merit than people doing the same practices at the time of the Buddha, because there's more to practice with and there's more obstacles to overcome. And so by putting in effort, you really develop the mind quickly, because you have to put in that effort and make it work. It's not going to be flowers falling from the sky and quick, cheap, and easy enlightenment. And so I really love this text because it talks about how to transform the mind so we can deal with adversity. Because most of us, when there's adversity, we crumble, don't we? We just either fall apart and we get depressed and we feel hopeless and helpless, or we get angry and we lash out. Yeah, and neither one of those responses to difficulty benefits us or benefits anybody else. In fact, it just creates more negative karma to encounter more bad circumstances and more suffering. So these teachings are really absolutely essential. They aren't, the mind training teachings aren't something we can skip over and say, oh, well, they sound easy, so let's get on to something, highest class tantra. But these are the things that, personally speaking, have really saved my life in many ways, because these are the things that when adversity comes, and adversity comes to all of us, even though we don't want it, these are the teachings that really work when you practice them. Yeah. Of course, if you just listen to them and don't practice them, they don't work. Or if you just practice them once and then, every other month, then, they're not going to work, because there's something that where our mind really needs to be transformed, and that comes about through repetition, through familiarization. Yeah, that's the only way to do it. We can hire people to sleep for, we can hire people, we can't hire people to sleep for us. We can hire them to open the, mow the lawn and do the laundry, but we can't hire them to eat for us or sleep for us. And so similar with the Dharma practice, we can't hire anybody else to do it. And you can sponsor all the pujas you want, but unless you really work at transforming your mind, you know, what are the pujas going to do? You know, because for pujas to be effective, we have to have some merit, you know, that can help them work. Yeah. So, yeah, so this teaching is so important, and it's, you know, I know you've been having a series of teachings so far, so you've gone through some of the initial steps, and then here I'm walking in on taking and giving meditation, you know, like out of nowhere. But all the preliminary steps were so important, you know, cultivating equanimity, generating bodhicitta, and especially since the taking and giving meditation follows the tradition of Shantideva of equalizing and exchanging self for others, and actually is rooted in Nagarjuna's precious garland. That's where the line for the taking and giving meditation is found. You know, then it's really important to spend some time on equalizing and exchanging self for others first. Because if we don't do that, we just kind of walk in, because I hear all sorts of people nowadays, oh, like, tonglen is great. I love the tonglen practice. And it's like, really? Are you really doing it properly? You know, because if you really think deeply about the tonglen practice and you really immerse your mind in it, you see this amazing resistance come up, you know, because it's about taking on others' suffering. Yeah. And so, you know, when you just come out of nowhere and jump into tonglen, oh, I'm inhaling, taking on the suffering of all living beings, and I'm exhaling, giving them my body wealth and merit, and it's all so easy and I feel so good. Yeah, well, if you can do that, fantastic, and feel good, I rejoice, because when I really think about taking on the suffering of others, yeah, when I really put my mind in it, you know, I want to take on their cancer, I want to take on their anger, I want to take on their feelings of exclusion or, you know, racism or whatever it is. When I really think of that, yeah, do I really want to face all those obstacles and that suffering? Do I really want to do it? You know, and that's when the self-centered mind comes up and says, no way, you know, if there's happiness, I'll take that, but I don't want to take suffering. And giving, I'll give the, you know, the worst opportunity to somebody else. I'll give the problems to somebody else, but give my body. I don't want to give my body. I don't want to even let a mosquito bite me, let alone give my body. Give my wealth, you know? Yeah, so giving our wealth, it sounds so easy when you just meditate on it. Yeah, but I always tell the story of, you know, regarding this, of when I was in Bodh Gaya, I had these old beat up plastic shoes. You can't imagine, old beat up Indian plastic shoes. They weren't worth anything. I said, I'm not attached to these things. And then one day I was at the stupa, so, you know, you take your shoes off outside the stupa, and I did my circumambulations and so on, came out, and my shoes were gone. No way. Oh, these are my shoes, give them back. Even though they were cruddy old plastic shoes that were falling apart. All of a sudden this attachment came up. So I'm going to give all my possessions? Really? Really? You know, like my nice blanket that I like to crawl under when it's cold outside? Yeah, in the summer I'll give it, but don't want to give it in the winter. Yeah? So, you know, all this resistance comes up in the mind. Giving our merit, yeah. I think giving my merit is very easy because I don't really believe I have any, you know? But I remember one time when I was teaching a man in Singapore. He wanted to learn meditation, so I was giving him some instruction. And at the end I said, okay, now we're going to dedicate our merit. And he looked at me and he said, Venerable, I have so little merit, I don't want to give it away to anybody. You know? And he was so sincere, you know, because he really treasured his merit and saw that he believed in karma, you know. And so I assured him that when you dedicate it, you're actually increasing it. So I think he eventually decided to do that. But, you know, if you really understand merit and the importance of merit in future lives, you know, really, do I want to give it away? Yeah, all the causes of happiness for future lives, I want to like just give away. Clutching. Yeah. So, yeah, so for me, you know, the tonglen meditation is, it brings up the self-centeredness so I can see my self-centeredness clearly. Yeah. And I find that helpful because so often during the day, I am not seeing my self-centeredness clearly. I'm just going through my life, as I always do, of course, thinking of myself first, but not realizing that I'm doing that. Yeah. And not seeing clearly the attachment to self, the attachment to my happiness, the aversion to my suffering, and the apathy towards other people's suffering. Yeah, and just how easy it is. Oh yeah, the people in Syria, I feel so bad for them. Yeah, or the people in Las Vegas, can you imagine? You know, I feel bad for them. But I don't really feel bad for them the way I would feel bad for myself if I were in those situations. Yeah, I feel bad from them as a spectator from a distance, sitting here in a safe room with like-minded people. Yeah, really feeling their suffering, really wanting to take it on. That's a different ballgame when our own self-centeredness feels challenged and feels threatened. Yeah. Because we can see the moment we have the tiniest bit of suffering, how strongly we react. We don't even want our own suffering, let alone to accept somebody else's. Okay? Small little suffering. Somebody looks at me and, you know, says, you left your clothes on the floor, pick them up. That's all they say. You left your clothes on the floor, pick them up. 10 words. 10 words. What happens inside me? What do you mean I left my clothes on the floor? You left your clothes on the floor. I was going to pick my clothes up anyway. Anyway, they aren't totally on the floor. They're just in a pile over there. And, you know, and you leave your clothes all over the place. And I don't usually do this. I was on my way to pick them up anyway. So get off my back and leave me alone. Yeah. All they did was say 10 words. Yeah. And my mind says, they are inflicting suffering on me, and I've got to stop them immediately and set the record straight, or else they're going to overwhelm me. Look, and all they did is they pick up your clothes. Okay? So are you seeing how, we are so self-protective and not willing to experience any suffering? Yeah. So here's this meditation that is asking us to, with compassion, not out of obligation, but with compassion, to imagine taking on the suffering of others and imagine giving our happiness to them. And even though we aren't really taking anything on or giving anything, just the thought of it, we don't like. If we're really in touch with how self-centered we are. Yeah. If we're not in touch, then it's like, oh yes, all the suffering comes upon me. I feel so good, I've taken all their suffering away. And I'm giving them all my happiness. But why is this person making so much noise so I can't meditate properly and they're bugging me? You see what I mean? Yeah, that's like me when I was a baby nun. Yeah, I remember talking to some other people. I forget what we were talking about, but inside my mind, I was going, oh, I want this conversation to be over because I want to go meditate on compassion. Yeah. So this is what we're like, No suffering for me. You can have the suffering. Yeah. And I'm going to prove to you that I am top dog around here. Yeah. I'm going to be, do they have alpha females?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, they have alpha. So I'm going to be the alpha female. I'm going to let everybody here know I'm boss. And they better not bug me, because if they bug me, then they face my wrath. I've been practicing Yamataka. I know how to go. Yeah, so don't cross me because I'm in charge here. So that's kind of like what we're like. And then we come into this meditation and, it says take on the suffering of all living beings as you inhale, and as you exhale, give them your body, possessions, and merit. Yeah. So then I think, okay, it's real quick. Yeah, got it over with. Yeah, got your suffering, give you the happiness. I don't need to worry about anything else anymore. Yeah? But if you really do the meditation, yeah, it shows us what we need to work on to develop genuine love and compassion. Okay? So we often start the taking and giving meditation of not with taking on the suffering of others and giving them our happiness, but thinking of ourselves in the future and what suffering we're going to have in the future, and imagine taking on that suffering. Okay? So, whatever suffering you anticipate experiencing tomorrow, like the alarm clock ringing and you want to sleep longer. Yeah. Or the person in meditation clicking their mala and disturbing you. Or maybe somebody criticizing you. Or maybe somebody contradicting your way. You have an idea of how you want to do things and they say that's a lousy idea. So the suffering you experience from that. Or even you get a little bit braver and think about, we think about our own suffering. So think about your suffering as you age. Yeah, when your body isn't doing what you want your body to do. You used to be able to do all these things, and now your body is totally uncooperative and doesn't want to do it. Yeah. And of course, you aren't young anymore, young and attractive. So you go into a store and nobody serves you. Yeah. My sister was commenting on that. She's 50 now, and she said, I remember years ago I went in the store, everybody would serve me. Now I go in the store, they all ignore me. It's just something simple like that. Yeah. And then, you know, you're old and you look in the mirror and you say, who's that? And then you go on Medicare. You always thought that's for old people. Medicare is for my grandparents. What am I doing on Medicare? And then your birthdays start mounting up, and then you start becoming forgetful. Yeah. So you're in the middle of a sentence and you wonder how you're going to finish it because you can't remember. Yeah. Or you see people, or you're thinking about somebody, you can't remember their names. So all sorts of things. So you just think of the suffering of our old age, and then the suffering of sickness, and the fear of sickness. You know, when you're young, you don't like getting sick, but you're not so afraid of sickness because when you're young, you're convinced you're going to recover. Yeah. When you get to a certain age, you realize, you know, there's a lot of people my age who are under the ground now. Yeah, and what kind of sickness am I going to get? And, you know, I'm old, the body's breaking down. It may not heal from this sickness. Yeah, because you've seen so many people you know who are younger even die from different things. Yeah, so then the fear of sickness comes, the fear of aging, the fear of death. So, so you start the meditation off thinking about your own suffering and developing the courage just to take on, you know, our own suffering that is going to happen if we live that long. Yeah, so really thinking about what this is like and having compassion for our future self and wanting to remove that suffering. But even though it's our own suffering, still there can be resistance, like, I don't want to suffer. Yeah, even if it's my own suffering, can't somebody else take it on away from me? Okay. But no, trying to think, you know, I will take it on myself and I will bear this with a happy mind. Yeah. So I will age, I will get sick, I will get forgetful, whatever it is, with a peaceful, happy mind. Yeah. Because that's, if you're going to take on the suffering, your own suffering in the future, you need to have a peaceful, happy mind now to do that. Okay, to even imagine doing that. Okay, so you imagine taking that on. And then you imagine giving your future self your body, possessions, merit, and so on. Okay, so what's very skillful, well, before I get into that, then you go from your own suffering, then you go to a friend, yeah, or a few friends, then you go to strangers, and you may think of specific groups of people, but always have faces on these people. Yeah, they aren't just, you know on the internet, when there's not a picture, you just have the shape of somebody's head. They don't all look like that. I'm taking on the suffering of all sentient beings, and all they are blue shape like you have on the, the outline of head. Yeah, that's whose suffering I'm taking on. No, you think of real live people that you have seen or that you know, yeah, and try and get a sense of what their dukkha is, their unsatisfactory conditions, and generate a sense of compassion and take that on. So you do it, first yourself, then friends, relatives, people you care about, then strangers and different groups of people, and then finally the people that you don't like, the people that you feel threatened by. Yeah, because those are the people more than ever that we need to practice with. It's easy generating love and compassion for people who are nice to us. Very easy. Yeah, but people who criticize us, who beat us, who insult us, who ridicule us, who steal our stuff, yeah, these people to develop love and compassion for is a much greater challenge, because we have anger inside of ourselves. And when people do things we don't like, yeah, so the anger goes, and sometimes our behavior goes, and sometimes our behavior goes, we withdraw from the situation. But it doesn't matter, we're still angry. And you may be tight-lipped and not talk, but the vibes around you are like, you can tell somebody's really mad. So this is all stuff we need to work on. And the people who harm us are the people that we need the most in order to become Buddhas. Yeah, because to become fully awakened, we have to have love and compassion for each and every sentient being. We can't leave out one, not even one. Okay? So we can't leave out Osama bin Laden, and we can't leave out Donnie. Yeah? We can't make Donnie into such an enemy that he's outside our love and compassion. So the nice thing about this meditation when you do it is when you're taking on their suffering, or I actually prefer to use the word dukkha, because when we say suffering, we think I'm taking on their cancer and their bad moods and things like that, okay? But dukkha is actually much more than cancer and bad moods. Yeah, cancer and bad moods are actually the easy part of it, because that's the suffering of this life that is temporary. When we talk about the first noble truth, the truth of dukkha, the truth of unsatisfactory experiences, it doesn't mean just the ouch kind of suffering. Yeah? It means the happiness that disappears, the happiness that disappoints, the happiness that leaves us disillusioned. Yeah. And it also means just being under the influence, under the control of afflictions and karma, and so not having freedom, being imprisoned by afflictions and karma. Yeah? So that we aren't really free. Because like I was saying, somebody says the slightest thing to us that we don't like, our mind instantly, like that, anger. Yeah, we aren't free from anger. We're completely controlled by our anger. Yeah, sometimes we get so angry, we don't even know what we're saying. We don't even know what we're doing. We're like crazy people. Yeah, you ever had that happen? Yeah, I think we've all experienced that kind of rage. Really, it's like, you know, we're out of this universe and we're not free. And then the bad part of that is that we keep creating more and more and more destructive karma, and more karma in general. That causes us to be born in cyclic existence again and again and again and again. So when we're taking on the suffering, you know, suffering is not a good translation for dukkha. We should think of all these unsatisfactory experiences of samsara and want to take all of them onto ourselves. Okay? So the good thing about taking on the suffering of others is that we don't just visualize, you know, when we take it on, we think of it as like pollution or, you know, smoke or grime or something really disgusting. You know, like my compost toilet yesterday, how bad it smelled. I don't know how many of you walked past it, but it was bad, okay? And so we think of all the suffering of whichever group we're taking the suffering of, coming out like that, you know? And with a mind of compassion that is happy to alleviate the suffering of others, we imagine that it comes into us, that we inhale it. And then it's not just that we inhale it, and now we're totally filled up with this pollution and grime and bleh, you know. But we use what others don't want, which is their dukkha, their suffering, to destroy what we don't want, which is our own self-centeredness and our own self-grasping ignorance. So we imagine our self-centeredness and self-grasping ignorance, which are the root of our problem, yeah, as like a lump in our heart. So either you can think of it as a heap of dirt, a heap of filth, or, you know, a rock, or, you know, something disgusting. Yeah, and so we take the dukkha and suffering of others that they don't want, and we use it to destroy what we don't want. Self-centeredness, self-grasping ignorance, that are at our heart chakra in the form of this pollution and stuff. So when we take on the suffering, we imagine that it becomes like a lightning bolt, and it just hits that gunk at our heart, and completely it vanishes, totally disperses, yeah, gone. And so that our whole heart now is wide open. Yeah, you know how when you're feeling a lot of fear or a lot of self-centeredness, how you feel it here, and sometimes there's even pain, yeah? So all of a sudden, all of that tension that we store is just completely gone. Our heart center wide open. Yeah, fearless. So we take what they don't want, use it to destroy what we don't want. And then we just sit there for a while with this completely open sky-like sensation in our own heart and enjoy it. Yeah, the freedom that we experience from not thinking about ourselves. Yeah. Do you ever have that feeling that you're just so tired of thinking about yourself? You know, and that the self is just a big pain in the neck. You have to protect it. You have to please it. You know, And like, what a relief. I don't have to. There's nobody there to please. There's nobody there to protect. There's just open space. And so you enjoy it. And then within that open space, yeah, you cultivate love, wishing sentient beings to have happiness in its causes. And then you radiate a beautiful light from your heart. And you imagine giving to sentient beings. And what you're giving, your body, your possessions, and your merit or your virtue. Okay? So our body, yeah, our body, our treasured body, the thing we don't want to give away that we're so attached to. Yeah? But we develop again a feeling of courage. And so I'm going to use my body to, I'm going to multiply it and I'm going to transform it, or you transform it first and then multiply what you've transformed, and give to other living beings what they need. Okay? So, you know, I send, what do I send to Syria? Yeah, I send food, I send medicine. Yeah, how do you send safety? Maybe you send something that will distract all the troops, you know. Maybe first, before you do taking and giving for the Syrian civilians, you have to do taking and giving for Bassad, you know, his troops and situations, as well for all the different militias, and take on their suffering so that those beings are freed of suffering and have happiness. Then the civilians you can work on, because, you know, they don't have these other people threatening them all the time. Yeah, but you just think, you know, what can I give to these people? And to Puerto Rico, you send, again, medicine and food. You send machines that you make up that just suck up the water and send it out to us here in the Northwest. Or you send it out to California. Yeah, you have machines that transform all that seawater, miraculously take it to California. It puts out all the fires in California. Okay? So you think about, you know, different people and what they need. You have your body transform into that. And your body can also, you imagine it transforming into different people. So for some people, their major suffering is incredible loneliness, you know, and what they need is a friend. So you imagine that your body can emanate as a friend for every person who's lonely. Yeah, and every person who's lonely is going to want a different kind of friend. Somebody who's 95 in an old folks' home, yeah, might want a friend who's 5 years old, a little kid who comes plays with them. Or they might want another 95-year-old to sit and talk with. Yeah, but whatever it is, you emanate as that person. And then you think of somebody in the inner city who's lonely, who's getting drawn into gangs, even though they don't want to, but there's kind of no choice because of the social pressure. You take on their suffering, and then you give them opportunities. And you give them friends that will, you know, expose them to different things and give them different choices that they can make in their lives so they're not stuck in that situation. Okay, so you don't necessarily give to people what they want, you know, because some 16-year-old in the ghetto may want a gun, but that's not what you give to them out of love. Okay, what you give to them is a friend who will show them their own intelligence and give them a vision of a life that can be peaceful. Yeah, because sometimes all it takes for young people is to meet one adult that cares about them, and it completely transforms their life. So you imagine becoming that person, you know, for every lost teenager. Yeah. Or kids in war zones who don't have parents at all. You know, you imagine emanating as foster parents who now takes these kids and raises them and loves them. Okay, so whoever it is, you manifest as the kind of people that they need. You know, and then so that's giving your body. Then you give your possessions. Okay. So my old dirty plastic shoes that I'm so attached to, yeah, I give those, but I also give the nice shoes I have too. Okay. And so you look around everything you have and you imagine it multiplying and transforming. And for people who need washing machines, your sweatshirt becomes a washing machine. And for people who need tractors, you know, your kitchen becomes a tractor. So you give away everything you have, but it becomes exactly what other people need at this particular moment. Okay? And also you give them the things that they need to practice the Dharma. So it's not just satisfying their temporal needs, it's satisfying their Dharma needs. Yeah, so the people who need teachers, you emanate as teachers. The people who need texts in their own language, you emanate as those translated texts. Excellent translation texts, you know, to give to people in their own language so that they can read them. Okay, so you just think, you know, what do people need to practice the Dharma? Yeah, maybe somebody needs a prostration board, somebody needs a mandala set. Yeah, a group of people need a Dharma center, monastics need a monastery. Whatever it is, you imagine your possessions transform into that, and you give that to them. Okay? And then the third thing we give is our merit or our virtue. So all the good karma that we've created through not only doing this practice, but all of our Dharma practices and all the merit from previous lives and so on. And we think of, you know, pooling and drawing all that merit together and then sending it out to other living beings. Again, it can be sent out in terms as things that aid their Dharma practice, or we could even imagine sending them realizations. Yeah, so people who are really stuck, you know how we get stuck in our practice on certain points and other people get stuck? So we imagine sending to them, yeah, the realization that completely gets them unstuck where they are. Okay, so somebody who's really having a problem with anger, we send them the realization of fortitude and love. Somebody who's really having a problem with attachment and desire, we send them renunciation. We send them the wisdom realizing emptiness. So we imagine sending out all the our merit transforming into not only the causes and conditions for them to gain realizations, but those realizations themselves. And as we give it, then we imagine that, you know, they transform. So here's this person who you used to not be able to bear because they just completely bugged you to death. And you imagine them now becoming a Buddha. Somebody you respect, somebody that you pay homage to, somebody you can learn from. Okay. So although in the 7-point mind training, it advocates, it says, you know, do the taking and giving upon the breath. So when you inhale with compassion, taking dukkha or suffering, when you exhale with love, giving body possessions and merit. I think it's much better for us at the beginning to really do the meditation slowly so that we can get some feeling of it. you know. And if we find some resistance in our own mind, you know, fear coming up, I can't give it, you know, I'm afraid to be without this. Then you go back, you know, now you see the self-centeredness. Then you go back and you do whatever meditation you need to do to relax the mind and change your attitude so that you feel happy to take on their suffering and give them your happiness. Okay? So if all of a sudden you think, I don't want to take on their sickness, you know, I don't want it, thank you very much. Then to really go back and think, you know, what is this body? It's just atoms and molecules. It's not who I am. I'm going to have to separate from it sometime or another. Yeah, I don't need to be so possessive of this body. I don't need to be so afraid of pain in this body because, you know, the body is just, it's the guest house, like it says in the 37 practices. It's a guest house. Yeah. If I live in a guest house, I don't worry about everything that happens to it because I'm only there for a short time. So same with our body. So we apply whatever antidote we need in order to release the self-centeredness and the self-grasping if we encounter that while we're doing it. Yeah. And so similarly, sometimes if fear, you know, fear of different things arise, because fear is related to attachment. Yeah. We fear losing what makes us happy. We fear, yeah, losing what gives us pleasure. And fear is also related to anger because when we're afraid, we often get angry because it gives us a false sense of power. Okay, so those three emotions, you know, attachment, fear, and anger, they're interrelated. Also, attachment and anger are related because the more we hold on to something, the angrier we get when it collapses or it breaks or somebody else takes it or when we can't get it. Okay, so, you know, you work with, you go back to the Lam Rim and do the meditations that are necessary to help you break the attachment. Yeah, so what do you meditate on? What's the antidote to attachment? Some of the antidotes to attachment. What are you going to meditate on? Hello? All you online, what are you going to meditate on? What's the antidote to attachment? It's not silence. I can't hear.
Generosity.
Generosity, okay, that's one antidote to attachment. What else? Before you can give, what antidote, you know?
Repulsion.
Yeah, so you have to see sometimes the ugly aspect or the disadvantageous aspect of whatever it is you're attached to. What else?
Impermanence.
Yay, finally, impermanence. Yes, we think about our impermanence, the impermanence of the object. Yeah, what else?
The emptiness of the object.
Yep.
And
Yeah, the emptiness of the object. What else? The disadvantages of samsara. Yeah. If you meditate on the disadvantages of samsara, your attachment for samsaric objects vanishes. Okay? So you know, if you find attachment arising when you're doing the taking and giving, go back and do these other meditations to counteract your attachment. Yeah. If you find when you're doing the taking and giving meditation that your mind just has some resistance, like, I can't stand that person, I don't want to take on their suffering, then what do you meditate on?
Equanimity.
Yep, equanimity. What else?
That everyone has been your mother.
Yeah, everyone's been your mother and has been kind to you as your mother. What else?
That we all dislike suffering, don't want suffering, we all want happiness, and we're all going to die soon anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're all in it together. Why not help each other? Yeah. And then I think also the meditation on kindness in general. If you do the 9-point equalizing self and others meditation, you know, how one of those points is just how we depend on sentient beings just to stay alive. Everything we have in our life, everything we know is, you know, we've received due to the kindness of others. And so meditating on that really helps us to loosen the repulsion or the anger against certain people. Okay? So you see that, you know, to do the taking and giving, you really have to have a foundation in all the other Lamrim meditations and the other Lojong meditations, because you need to be able to use them, you know, when your mind, your self-centeredness and your self-grasping arise. We need to use those other antidotes to oppose them. Okay. When you get really good with the taking and giving meditation and you bring it into your breath, then they say when we inhale, we imagine there's suffering coming in through our left nostril. When we exhale, we imagine radiating the light with the transformed body, wealth, and enjoyment and virtue out through our right nostril. So in through the left, out through the right. What else? Also, oh, I forgot to tell you, this book, okay, is called Transforming Adversity into Joy and Courage. It was written by Khenzo Jampa Tekchok. He's the former abbot of Serajay Monastery. I'm sure Gelek Rinpoche and Khenzo Rinpoche knew each other and were friends because they were contemporaries, you know. And anyway, so this book, Transforming Adversity into Joy and Courage, is a commentary on the 37 practices of bodhisattvas, which is another one of the mind training texts. And chapter 10 and 11 in this book are really good for the meditations on generating bodhicitta. And especially chapter 11, it contains the most extensive explanation of the tonglen meditation that I've ever seen anywhere. Because he talks about there not only taking from people, you know, and expanding it to all the different realms, the six classes of sentient beings, the 3 realms of sentient beings. Not only that, but also taking from the environment, sentient beings' environment, and giving to their environment. So especially now that, you know, people are so interested in taking care, we see we have to take care of our environment, the taking and giving meditation is very good for that. So he explains that all very, very in a lot of detail in this book. Okay, so I've talked for about an hour. Let's have some comments and questions. I won't promise the answers, but we can try. Okay, so one question here's come up. Somebody is saying, if I imagine giving them material things, I feel like I'm trapping them more in samsara because they're going to get attached to those material things, or they'll, get angry at somebody else who tries to take them. And so how's that really going to benefit them? Yeah. So the thing is that before we can teach people the Dharma, they need to have a certain degree of comfort. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So you can think that you're giving these things to fulfill, their physiological needs, some of the, their needs for friendship, for belonging, and so on, and then think that you're giving those things, their needs are fulfilled, and then you can give the things they need to practice the Dharma and give them the realizations. Yeah, because the thing is, if we're going to benefit people from the Dharma, we have to meet them where they're at. Yeah, if they're hungry, they can't listen to the Dharma if they're hungry. Yeah, if they're, impoverished in other ways, they can't really hear the Dharma because the mind is too preoccupied with their gross suffering. So think that you're giving them these things that satisfy the gross suffering, and that think as you give them that they're not becoming attached to them, so they're not going to become angry or generate negative karma in relationship to them. Yeah. And then make sure you give them the Dharma afterwards. Okay?
So, got not a question, but a comment, so you can say whatever you want about it. On the business of feeling compassion for those that we would prefer not to feel compassion for whatever reason. There's something that I do. I've never actually tried this with Donald Trump, but I guess it's worth a try. When I encounter some person in daily life who annoys me, is obnoxious, whatnot, and I'm feeling sorry for myself that I have to put up with this, I do a little thing where I think to myself, well, just being in the same room with that person for a minute or two is so upsetting. Imagine what it would be like to be around that person 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Imagine being someone in that person's family or being that person. Imagine having to look in the mirror every day and see that face. And if I was in that position, I might be kind of ornery too. So it's kind of easier to sort of shrug and forgive them and feel a little bit better about where I am in life.
Yeah, yeah. So I think, yeah, that's a very good way to help get rid of some of the resistance for some people. Yeah, just thinking about what it would be like to be them. Yeah, because we have to live with their behavior that's coming from their afflictions. But imagine being that person with those afflictions and having a mind that gets so overpowered in that way. And then that helps us generate compassion for that person instead of hatred. Or like you said, imagine being having to live with that person, being married to them or working with them or whatever it is all the time, and how difficult that would be, and then take that suffering on. And that's also reminding me of one way that I use the taking and giving meditation that I find very helpful. There's a few ways. One is, when you're sometimes in situations where there's just, for lack of better words, bad vibes. You know, it's just, there's people around who are angry or belligerent or violent, or there's just bad vibes. And my mind usually, like, it's like this, and I want to get away, and I'm, you know, pushing that energy away. And what I find really helps is I do the taking and giving meditation. I imagine taking all those bad vibes, you know, and transforming them into that lightning bolt that then hits at my own heart and destroys my own self-centeredness, you know, and leaves that open space in my heart, you know. And similarly, when I'm in situations where I'm afraid, yeah, instead of just withdrawing in fear, I imagine taking on all the suffering in that situation, and again using it to destroy my own self-centeredness and ignorance, anger, and attachment, and then radiate out, you know, kindness into the situation, radiate out healing energy and cooperation and kindness and understanding into that situation. So I find doing that helps my mind so much when I'm in situations where I'm afraid, where there's just a lot of energy, negative energy. Yeah. You know how sometimes you may be in a social situation and family dinners, you know, and you can feel the anger growing in the family dinner, and you know there's going to be an explosion, and you just do the taking and giving meditation, yeah, and then, you know, so that all you're feeling is like, I gotta get out of here, I can't stand this, you know, it disappears. Or you see situations where, of course, when we see situations where we can intercede and stop suffering, stop one person from harming another, we do it. But some situations, there's no way we can intercede, you know. Maybe we're watching it on TV or whatever, maybe we can't get there, you know. We can't intercede. Then we do the taking and giving meditation, yeah, and it keeps us involved in the situation, and it sends out some kind of good energy to those people, which I think is very, very important, yeah. And another situation where taking and giving is good to do is when we're sick or we're injured. You know, instead of just focusing single-pointedly on how much I hurt and how much I'm afraid of hurting, you know, you have your physical pain, you have your mental pain. So instead of just sitting, dwelling in all that pain and not wanting it, then doing the taking and giving meditation. You know, everybody who has this sickness, I'm taking it upon myself. Everybody who has this injury, as long as I'm suffering, may I take on their suffering from this injury. And then may I transform my body, wealth, and merit and give it to all those people who are suffering from the same thing I'm suffering from. Yeah.
We have an online question from Tracy.
Okay.
Is it good to do tonglen for people who have died, even though we don't know what they're experiencing?
Sure, why not? Yeah. we can make an educated guess, and even, you know, if it's inaccurate, it doesn't matter, because the taking and giving meditation functions so deeply to increase our love and compassion. So there's a question here saying that you don't know the antidotes to the other afflictions, but if you want to take on others' suffering, with the motivation to experience that feeling of openness, yeah, then is that doing it with a self-centered attitude?
Even though it is a means to the end of expressing that radiance of transformation for others.
Right, even though you're trying to take on suffering and you want to express goodness and radiance and everything. I think if that helps you in doing the practice, then that's fine. Yeah, you know, because if you think, you know, I want to do it so I feel that openness, then, you know, you do it, you have that good feeling from the openness, but then you think more and more deeply about the suffering you're taking and what you're giving, and that draws you more into having, you know, love and compassion. Okay, so another question here. What text would I recommend for eliminating self-centeredness and self-grasping ignorance? So, like I said, all the texts that dwell on mind training are very good. The Lam Rim texts are very good. Also, all the texts that talk about emptiness, the ultimate nature, they help to destroy the self-grasping. So, yeah, so there's texts. You know what is a really good text is Shantideva's Engaging in the Bodhisattva's Deeds. That's a wonderful text, and it deals with all these topics.
I am a person throughout my life has been prone to being short-tempered. And there are times when I am so angry that I can't even figure out why I'm angry. I can't see what the provocation was. I can't see what it is. And one of the teachings that Rinpoche gave in his Lojong in 7 points text that has been useful to me when I'm really feeling out of control is related to what you said earlier. I say, may my anger substitute for anger that other people are suffering. May whatever consequences they're going to have from their anger fall upon me instead. And that's been useful when I'm really out of control.
Yeah, yeah. That's very, very good. So I'll repeat it so everybody can hear. So, you know, he's saying how sometimes it happens, and we've all experienced this, where we get raging angry, you know, like out of control angry. And what he's found so far is to, when that happens, is to say, you know, all the suffering of everybody else who's angry, may I take that suffering from their anger onto myself. Yeah, because let's face it, when we're angry, we are not happy campers. We are totally miserable. And so thinking about the suffering of everybody else who's angry and thinking, as long as I'm angry and I'm suffering, may I take on myself the suffering of all those other people who suffer from anger. And that's very, very effective because, again, it's opening our eyes to the experience of other living beings. We aren't just sitting there and, you know, stewing in our own anger. We're saying, wow, you know, there's a universe out there with other living beings who have the same horrible feeling as I do. And as long as I'm feeling this, may I take on their pain from it. Yeah, and very, very effective. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. So, so somebody's saying sometimes when they do the taking and giving meditation, fear comes up of, if I take on the suffering of others, you know, it's going to interfere with my own Dharma practice. If I take on their sickness, I'm going to be sick. I won't be able to practice. If I take on their poverty, I won't have my computer and my Dharma books and my Tibetan dictionary, and what'll I do without them? You know, if I take on their ill health and I'll have ill health, I won't be able to practice. So there's a lot of fear and grasping that comes up. So I think, you know, when that comes up, then to say, okay, well, there's two things. One is we don't actually take on their suffering and giving our happiness, but that's kind of an excuse to deal with what you're talking about. To really deal with it is to say, okay, I'm sick, I'm broke. Now I still have the Dharma teachings in my heart. I may not be able to practice the way I would like in a nice, safe, clean place with my teacher sitting in front. But now I have to completely change my mode of practice so that it matches the situation I'm in. Yeah? So, because, you know, sometime in our life, if we live that long, that's what's going to happen. And we may all of a sudden, from one day to the next, go from healthy, be in a car accident, and now we're lying in bed and quadriplegic. You know, those things happen. And to think, okay, if it happens sometime where my, you know, my whole world changes, whether it slowly or quickly changes, I will have my mind adapt to that new situation. So instead of clinging to my idea of the wonderful Dharma situation I have right now and I don't want to let it go, is to say, you can purify and create merit in whatever situation you're in. So even if I get, you know, kidnapped by the Taliban, okay, there's going to be a major change in how I practice, but I have the teachings, aren't I fortunate? And I just make that major change in whatever situation I'm in, I practice in that situation. Instead of sitting there going, oh, but I want a better situation and I used to have this better situation, or somebody else has the better situation and I want it. Oh, that self-pity is just rubbish. Isn't it? Yeah. So like, okay, so everybody else gets to study treatise on the middle way from His Holiness, and I don't, you know, because I'm stuck in the hospital. I sit here and you know, I've heard teachings already. I do all the meditations that I've heard already, and, you know, maybe all I do is just do tonglen. But whatever situation I'm in, that's the situation I have to practice in. And so I just adjust my mind to that situation. So one question came is, you know, somebody's saying, sometimes I think of the suffering I'm going to experience in the future. Like in her case, what am I going to do for when my husband dies? Or what am I going to do if I become very ill? Or what am I going to do if I have dementia? Yeah, or what am I going to do if all of a sudden they blow up Medicare and, you know, there's nothing and I'm, you know, 80 and, yeah. So imagining, you know, these bad situations and say, because they're going to happen either this life, or if they don't happen this life, they're going to happen next life or a lifetime sometime in the future. So I do that same thing. And then I think in those situations, okay, how will I practice? And it relates to her question because it's going to entail a very strong switch from the way I'm practicing now, because, you know, I won't be able to, you know, have the nice circumstances that I have now for practice. But you think of, you know, when those things happen, or if they happen, how will I practice? You know, how will I work with my mind? What meditations do I need to do? You know, your husband dies and you're alone. Yeah. So how do you heal from that grief? And think, what are the Dharma methods to heal from grief. And, you know, so that instead of feeling that all your love is sunk into one person and all your security is with one person, that your love is like not a fixed pie and can go out to so many other sentient beings, you know, and that, you know, you can adjust to living alone. Yeah? And so, you know, to practice those things that will come in our life if we live that long, and to practice, you know, figure out what kind of meditations we need to do to make our minds okay with those situations. Hmm? And it seems to me that so much, because we have this idea of, I've got to have this situation to practice Dharma in. You know, I can't practice in any other situation. And that thought imprisons us. Yeah? And it's not true. Yeah? And that's the beauty, I think, in the 7-point mind training, is it tells us you can practice in any and every situation. No matter if people like you, if they don't like you, if you're sick, if you're healthy, if you're rich, if you're poor, no matter what your situation is, you know, if you've studied the Dharma, you know the meditations, you can do them. And nobody else can interfere with your doing those. You know, that you may get kidnapped by ISIS, but in your mind, you can still practice the Dharma. And this is what so many of the Tibetans did after 1959, when they were stuck in Tibet and many of them imprisoned. Yeah, I talked to one Lama, and, you know, he was telling me they took their malas, you know, the guards took their malas, took their texts, took everything. But he did retreat in prison, and he counted on his fingers. Yeah, and he did, you know, many retreats in prison. So. Okay, so the question comes, what happens if we have dementia and we can't remember the Dharma we're supposed to practice because our mind is out somewhere else? Then what's really going to be important is how much we have practiced now and how much of a habit we have in our mind for the meditations and the teachings that we've learned now, because we're very much creatures of habit. Yeah, and if we develop, really work hard, very hard now to develop a kind heart, then even if we're senile or we have dementia or Alzheimer's, we'll still have a kind heart and we'll act kindly to other people. Yeah. One of my friends was telling me that his mother was always very kind and very generous. And she got really severe Alzheimer's, so much so that she would put on like 7 pairs of clothes because she had forgotten that she had gotten dressed, so she'd keep putting on more and more clothes. And you know, she couldn't figure out what different things were used for. So, but he said whenever he went to visit her in the old folks' home and bring her candy or bring her a present, she would always take it and share it with all the other old people in the home, because that was her natural general instinct that she had developed from years before of taking delight in generosity. So, you know, many of us may not have that instinct to be generous. I don't, you know, but if we practice that now and develop that as a habit, then even if we're senile or whatever, it will still act that way. It'll come out. Yeah, so that depends on our practice now. which is why all the texts say we shouldn't regard Dharma practice as mañana en la mañana. No, it's not tomorrow morning, it's now. Yeah.
Hi.
Mm-hmm.
I just have, this is a comment, and one of the things that really helps me, that inspires me in doing this practice is visualizing that person. Like if it's a person that I have my ire up, towards or something, to visualize when I take their suffering away, the change in them, and see them, and their face softens, they become this beautiful person, and I fall in love with them.
Yeah.
So that helps me a lot. And then the other thing I just wanted to say is this, it's so delightful to get teachings from you. I think I'm speaking for everybody, and there's something really sweet too that we're sharing sanghas here, and I just wanted to mention that. It felt really nice. So.
Yeah, I think everybody here feels that way too. And just last week I was in Cleveland and then also in New York. So, and in the spring I'm going to your center in Netherlands. So, yeah.
We hope you come back to us too.
Okay, thank you. We invite all of you to come out here too. Okay?
Thank you.
But let me say the first thing you said so that other people can hear it is, she's saying how wonderful the feeling is when you imagine taking on the suffering or the dukkha from somebody else, and how they look when they're relieved from that pain. Yeah, and their face changes, their mood changes, their body language changes, and they become so wonderful and lovable. Yeah, so I think that's really, really good, and we should all do that with Donnie, and with Paul, and with Mitch, and with Jeff, and all those people that we can, sometimes have such a hard heart towards, to imagine taking on their suffering, because these people are not happy people. Yeah. If they were happy people, they wouldn't be behaving the way they are. So if we could take on their suffering and then imagine them being open and relaxed and at ease and filled with kindness and love, wouldn't that be nice? So that there, all the pictures that we see of these people online where, they're issuing some policy, then all of a sudden, totally, like you said, totally different expressions, and they're free from their suffering and their stress and their tension. Yeah. So do that for them, and also for the people in our lives that are overwhelmed by stress and tension and so on.
We have one more online question.
Okay.
Does tonglen really reduce the pain and suffering of others, or does it only help us?
It principally helps us. They say that you can't really take on others' suffering and you can't really give your happiness. But I think the mind is very powerful, and certainly we create good energy fields, for lack of a better word. You send out merit, you send out virtue, you're sending out something that I think by the power of the mind can affect others in a good way. And it certainly affects us. But we shouldn't just say, oh, well, it doesn't really affect others, so I don't need to do it. Because it does affect others, also indirectly, because the more we're able to increase our love and compassion, the more, when we're actually in the direct presence of other people, we can act with love and compassion. Yeah. So we need to do the meditation and build up that ability.
I'll ask my question then. You kind of just answered a minute ago, because I don't know if I was imagining this or I read the reading right before we came, and I thought that one of the results of this for me would be a sense of joy and happiness. And I started thinking, well, geez, I want that, sure, but I also want to do no harm, you know, to do no harm in most of my activities. And then I started thinking of these people that get really unbelievably physical and probably mental well-beings from running or weightlifting and stuff, and the great feelings they get from this. And so I started thinking, well, that's probably just what happens if I would really become a good practitioner and blah, blah, blah. Isn't that all to do with me? So I'm kind of asking, do you think this is the joy and the contentment that may come from this practice, is it on a physical as well as a mental level?
I think it could be, you know, because physical and mental are very related. And so, sure, I mean, one time, some years ago, I had a boil on my big toe. You cannot imagine how much your big toe can hurt. I could never imagine that kind of pain on my big toe. And I was living in a monastery out in the countryside. There was no way for me to get to medical care until the morning. And so all night I just lay in the gompa in the meditation hall, and I principally did taking and giving. And it definitely helped mentally. And I think by helping mentally, it made the physical pain much more tolerable. So I don't know if you can say the physical pain was less, or it just was more, it was the same, but it was more tolerable because of the change in my mind. But yes, there was a physical effect.
Thank you.